The Bahamas. A place of legendary beauty. Built over millennia on a foundation of ancient ocean coral. On its 3,000 islands and islets, there is a constant struggle between life and death for the most fearsome and magical creatures on the planet. The Bahamas are an archipelago nation. A country of islands scattered across 155,000 square kilometers of the North Atlantic Ocean. Their unique limestone geography means that the Bahamas are an unprecedented location to view wildlife. Perched on the edge are the mangroves, a tangle of shrubs growing out of the muck of a salty swamp. The distinctive root structure of these salt-tolerant trees houses a nursery. It is estimated up to 90% of fisheries species spend some part of their lives in the mangroves. Juvenile fish, lobsters, and even sharks shelter and feed here to nourish a food web reaching far offshore. Time in the mangroves is not measured in minutes, but by the rise and fall of the tides. As the tide comes in, the water advances up the shoreline of the island, fringed by networks of channels and lagoons. When the waters rise, parched creeks are flooded. The red mangrove closes its cells against the salt. Crustaceans are released from their silty refuge, and a cornucopia of food tumbles in on the flood to feed the waiting young. Topside creatures scramble higher to safety or move inland in search of shallower fare. One such creature is the mangrove tree crab. Like the ancient tree, the crab can survive both in and out of the brackish water of the swamp. But that's not all they share. Mangrove trees depend on the tannins that color their roots to deter most predators. The crab depends on the tannins to ward off its competition. The shell of this tiny fellow is less than 3 centimeters across. He can neutralize the chemical that kills other creatures. Using specialized bristles on his legs and pincers to rasp nutrients from leaves and bark as he goes, he climbs higher and higher. Ever alert, as predators are everywhere. This gray heron is looking for lunch, just as the tree crab is most exposed. And it's not alone. Sensing the threat, the crab swings around to the underside of the branch. And lets go. just his luck. Damselfish are notoriously territorial, and this one pushes him right into the clutches of a juvenile mangrove snapper and his hungry friends. The little crab's escape has gone horribly wrong. And it gets even worse. Thankfully for the crab, losing a leg is awkward, but not fatal. The fish perceive his movement, so his best defense is to stay still. But with a dash for safety, he may escape if he reaches the mangrove roots. When he starts, the attack resumes. And this time, the damselfish is hungry. The crab conserves energy by playing dead. When he goes limp, most of the pretty bullies lose interest. But the damselfish is relentless. Finally, the crab is more trouble than he's worth. And even the damselfish abandons its prey. It's now or never. When he reaches an algae-covered prop root, his painted back makes him almost completely invisible. And he scuttles back to safety. Until the next brush with death from above forces him to risk a brush with death from below. The mangroves provide protection to many juvenile creatures who must feed and grow before heading offshore to the coral reefs or open water. The spiny lobster arrives in the mangrove having already undergone tremendous transformation from a larvae released after hatching into an open ocean sea column. It molted repeatedly until it was large enough to make the long journey back to shore. Now, a final transformation to a recognizable bottom-dwelling form. And the job here is simple, if not easy, mere survival. Fewer than 4% of young lobsters make it through their year here in the nursery. Spiny lobsters are named for the spines of their shells and antennae. They lack the large claws other lobsters use to catch prey. This youngster is well on its way. He's grown whiskers that help him find food and navigate by sensing changes in water chemistry. On his bottom side, front legs draw food close to its strong mandibles, which crush his prey like teeth. He's molted several times, acquiring a pair of antennae. They will be his best protective asset when he gets used to them. A growth spurt has made it difficult to stay hidden in the algae of the prop roots. It's time to risk a move to find a colony of other young adults with room for him. During the time it takes to relocate, the young lobster will be completely vulnerable to grouper, muttonfish, rays, and even loggerhead turtles who want to eat him. As he covers open ground, he practices new strategies of defense. He's as comfortable moving backwards as forwards. And a quick flip of the tail jets him out of potential danger. And and into the young coral beds that can provide some cover. His first experiment here is a little awkward, but he rests. These swampy areas create a tropical ecoregion called mangroves. They take their name from a species of tree that has a high tolerance to salt water. The first red mangrove took root in the Bahamas around 50 million years ago. And without competition in this super saline environment, flourished. Over time, its tangle of stilted roots and decaying leaves created a place for more sediment to collect. Like some sharks, mangrove trees bear live young. This red mangrove seed germinated while still attached to the tree. Released at high tide, it will float downstream away from the shade cast by its parent. When the pod absorbs enough water to sink, it tips the small plant vertical and burrows into the warm bed of mud below, where it quickly takes root. As it grows, the mangrove sheds leaves and bark into the water, adding much-needed nutrients into the food cycle. Bacteria break down the detritus, in turn feeding other microorganisms, to fuel a food chain that extends out to the coral reefs and beyond. Lemon sharks are common in the shallow waters just beyond the mangroves. The females enter the creeks here to birth their pups. Lemon sharks have a yellowish-brown hue that gives them their name and provides camouflage against the sand bottom of their preferred habitat. They must grow rapidly to become apex predators nearly 3 meters in length and graduate to the reefs to reproduce after 15 years. But only half survive their first season in the swamp, with their survival rates greatest in the years when there are fewer young born and there is less competition. These youngsters patrol the shallows where the silty water cloaks them from their prey. They rely on a more acute form of vision and electroreceptors called ampullae of Lorenzini to locate meals in the dim water. But these pups are clumsy hunters. It's a good thing the labyrinth of mangrove roots keeps them safe from larger predators, including adult lemon sharks, while they learn. But they must eat several times a tide to consume the required 2% of body weight per day. In comparison, young barracudas have a more energy-efficient strategy. They hover and wait in the clear shallows for the tide to bring lunch to them. Juveniles and adults regularly feed on other fish species, like snappers, jacks, and grunts as prey. Barracudas possess a distinctive, slightly longer lower jaw, which creates a gap, allowing them to snap larger fishes in half to consume them. Their job is to consume more energy than they expend, and lunging for prey at speeds of up to 58 kilometers an hour burns fuel they will need to replenish. So for now, it hangs in the water here. And leaves the mangrove roots to restless baby sharks. Patient until it becomes hungry enough to take risks. But time and tide are ticking, and this young barracuda has not yet eaten. The barracuda faces a choice. Stay and conserve energy where food is scarce, or swim into the mangrove roots, where thousands of minnows school in the murky water, and the danger of being eaten himself by a larger fish is greater. He decides to risk it. So far, the barracuda's risk is paying off. This group of shiny minnows looks like easy pickings, even for a clumsy, unpracticed hunter. It lunges, but comes up empty. The school immediately regroups, making individuals harder to see, while the little hunter hangs back, preparing its next move. Unaware, it's about to have company. While the shallow water and mangrove roots thwart larger predators like sharks below, some creatures are better suited to navigate the mangroves from above. The colors of the Caribbean flamingo are synonymous with tropical destinations and are the only species indigenous to North America. Once found throughout the Bahamas, conservationists hope that a large colony on Great Inagua will help to rebuild other populations like this one on Andros Island. The group here numbers between 100 and 1,000 birds, but it is not a breeding colony. Flamingos are very social creatures. Major breeding colonies number in the tens of thousands. There is a security for pairs to raise young in these large groups where food is abundant. So the juvenile flamingos with grayish coloring likely hatched elsewhere. The Caribbean flamingo does not migrate, but will travel considerable distances to better food sources, like small crustaceans, mollusks, or insects, and in response to changes to the weather. Locals report that thousands of flamingos will disappear hours before the arrival of hurricanes and tropical storms. This leads researchers to speculate these birds are sensitive to the fluctuations in barometric pressure from these endemic storms. Called a stand, a group of flamingos must be prepared to take flight at a moment's notice. As a result, they spend time practicing their takeoffs and landings and extending their flight range, enabling them to cover 500 to 600 kilometers in a single night. Their broad webbed feet aid in takeoff and landing. They appear to run on the water. Once these juveniles are up to speed, they will travel at 60 kilometers an hour in either a V formation or a single long line. Though they can travel far, it's often just a short hop to the next feeding ground to feed and preen again. twice a day as the water recedes. The creatures deep in the mangroves devise ways to resist being pulled to the intertidal shallows and into the jaws of large adult predators waiting beyond the mangrove fringe. Smaller creatures burrow into the fertile muck or risk the heat and salinity of tidal pools to wait for the high water's return. As the pull gets stronger, the seahorse, which spends much of its entire life in less than 1.5 square meters, also fights going out with the tide. The long snout seahorse is one of 3 species found in the Bahamas. They grow up to 17.5 centimeters. They are very difficult to spot as their coloring adapts to their surroundings. Seahorses are an oddity in the natural kingdom. During mating season, females transfer their eggs to the males for fertilization. Male seahorses have an egg pouch on their stomach where the eggs gestate for 15 days before hatching. The delicate creature must eat between 50 and 100 tiny crustaceans per day just to survive. So when it finds a spot where zooplankton are plentiful, it hangs on as long as it can. But change is the only constant in the mangroves. Caught in the tide, it appears safer to go deeper where the waters of the current might remain calm. The seahorse edges along the sponge as it travels downward. But finding a secure perch proves difficult. This delicate seagrass is all that's available to help the seahorse hold on. And the seahorse is not the only creature looking for safe haven. The clumsy young lobster is a little too close for comfort. The seahorse faces a choice: risks the tide or its unpredictable neighbor. The seahorse navigates using its tail and a single dorsal fin for propulsion. Its 2 pectoral fins provide steering and stability. This time, it's in luck. Its prehensile tail wraps firmly around a low-hanging prop root, and the seahorse settles in to wait out the tide. The lobster, meanwhile, ventures still further to the mature grass ledges. He seems to be in the right place. This ledge is full of lobsters, but the colony doesn't give him a very warm reception. If he doesn't find a home soon, he may be in trouble. He has been lucky to avoid predators until now. At last, he finds a colony in a mature coral crevice where they put up no defense when he enters. But that doesn't mean he can back in just anywhere. He's made a classic adolescent blunder in his first 10 minutes. The youngster has backed right in on another lobster. After a small flurry, he quickly recovers and settles into his new home with the others. The protection of the ledge and the presence of many other lobsters is their best defense against being eaten. He'll stay until the whole colony migrates together out to the reefs. As the tide recedes, parts of the swamp dry out temporarily. Here, the remaining brackish water quickly evaporates in the heat, concentrating salt in the mud around these trees. Unlike the red mangrove, whose specialized stilts are half in, half out of the mud and seawater, the black mangrove has evolved a different system to oxygenate its roots. It sends out a network of tubes into the mud, where they sprout clusters of pneumatophores that push up through the silt like a small forest of snorkels, allowing the trees to breathe. The black mangrove is defenseless against the extreme concentrations of salt here. Unlike the red mangrove, its roots have no ability to exclude it. Instead, it has developed an efficient strategy. The black mangrove collects the salt it's forced to take in and directs it to the oldest leaf clusters and bark, where it's secreted through specialized glands on the leaf surface. As the bark and these leaves are shed, the excess salt drops away. In the young coral beds of the mangrove lagoon, a smaller but no less critical battle is playing out. Many kinds of damselfish vie for survival here, but they all seek the protection of the mangroves until they are large enough to move out to the nearby coral reefs. This one is a subadult long-fin damselfish. At full size, it will only be about 12.5 centimeters long. But despite its size, it is one of the most aggressive species in the mangrove nursery, considered aggressive even amongst other damselfish. The young coral here in the mangroves is the perfect site for filamentous algae, a plant the delicate farmer is able to digest. Incredibly, like humans and only a handful of other creatures on Earth, 4 species of damselfish, including the longfin, cultivate a crop for survival. The damselfish will destroy any other algae that grows on its turf, like a gardener pulling weeds. When other fish wander too close, the zealous little farmer does not hesitate to put the run on them. Of particular concern are parrotfishes and surgeonfishes, who also have a taste for the filamentous algae. It's a full-time job keeping marauders out of the garden. This youngster is practicing for life on the reef, where competition is even more fierce. Its vigilance consumes a lot of precious energy, but developing its farming skills is its best chance to live long enough to reproduce, which is already a long shot for this algae-eating fish in the mangroves. Mangroves are well suited to the Bahamas because of the geography of the region. There are great tidal ranges far inland. The mangroves here are dissected by creeks, where the water is deeper and the canopy opens to the sky, allowing other plants to compete for sunlight. This may look like clumps of waving seagrass obscured by the silt of the creek bed, but it's actually a creature so perfectly blended with its environment that it's nearly invisible. They thrive in the calm, shallow water of the mangrove creek, where light penetrates all the way to the silty bottom. Unlike other jellyfish, which float in the ocean column and have just one mouth, upside-down jellies suction themselves to the bottom. Their tentacles float just above nutrient-rich sediment, emitting a venomous mucus that paralyzes their prey. And their undulations keep water and silt moving across thousands of microscopic mouths. The algae these jellies absorb at birth gives each one its unique color. In a symbiotic relationship, this algae lives in the upside-down jellyfish and converts sunlight to energy. The silty, muddy bottom of the mangrove creek is also the home for the elegant moray eel. Though she looks ancient, this green moray still has her juvenile coloring. She has a lot to learn. Unlike other fish, the eel has no scales. Instead, a protective mucus coat wards off infection, parasites, and injury. This coating lends the greenish hue that gives these eels their name. But the mucus provides no protection against the neighboring upside-down jellyfish, which give a nasty sting. Normally nocturnal, the cautious creature has poor eyesight and must learn to use her sense of smell to protect herself and for hunting. This young moray scavenges the creek bed for squid, crustaceans, mollusks, and small fish, so these mangrove snappers are of little interest. This youngster will also perfect its precision navigation with her body-length fin and use her nose to avoid stinging jellyfish the next time she encounters them. Sometimes, the algae living within the upside-down jellyfish require brighter light to produce more energy. Then they release and float to the surface or to shallower water. But their timing has to be right. 4 times a day, every day, the tide rushes in and then out. When it does, any jelly that is not securely anchored is at risk. This jellyfish has let go as the tide is turning, and its delicate navigational pulse is no match for the pull of the current. The once calm waters of the creek have become more menacing. As it tumbles over sharp rocks and corals beyond the creek bed, its mantle catches and is torn, making navigation against the tide even more difficult. The wound emits a chemical signal like blood in the water to scavenging predators. It must find a place to land and attach. The jelly lands in a calm hollow. These rocky crevices shelter creatures that normally emerge only at night. But the smell of prey can overcome their sensitivity to light. The wounded jellyfish is just the lure they need. Its scent has penetrated deep into the lair of a horde of Caribbean fireworms. The fireworm is a bristleworm that thrives in the dark corners of the shallows. It has retractable bristles, which propel it along the rocky bottom. Other bristles are loaded with neurotoxins powerful enough to cause hours of pain to even human intruders and rapidly paralyze its smaller prey. Even among fireworms, they are unusually large and bold, about 25 centimeters long. They emerge as one and rise to sniff the water, allowing the scent of the wounded jelly to guide them to their prey. They close in. a single worm locks on. The fireworm has no teeth or jaws, just a gaping mouthhole with a single tooth-like ridge and the ability to suck out paralyzed tissue. The jelly rises and releases its own cloud of stinging toxins in self-defense. The bristleworm loses its grip for a fraction of a second, and the jelly drifts just out of reach. It settles into another hollow, and the predators renew their attack. Another worm latches on, this time to the mantle of the weakened jelly. Its bristles inject neurotoxins into the jelly's wounded tissue. As the paralysis sets in, it simply sucks out the guts of the jellyfish. The attack is efficient, leaving nothing behind. They disappear as quickly as they came. While the fireworms live out their entire lives in the mangroves, there are other, more surprising visitors here. Off the mangroves on Eleuthera Island, large groups of nurse sharks congregate here annually for mating during June and July. The depth of the water provides an unprecedented opportunity to observe and collect data. Normally a creature that feeds in shallow tropical oceans at night, their mating takes place in the daytime. Nurse sharks are an apex predator here. Only larger sharks will eat them. The name nurse shark is thought to have evolved from a misidentification of this species as Nusa, or cat sharks. For researchers, seeing females that have been previously tagged is especially exciting. The tags indicate that these sharks have been here before. This confirms that nurse sharks return to the same specific waters in the Bahamas to mate. These shallow waters play a key role in the courtship ritual of the nurse sharks. In a bid to control the mating process, female nurse sharks will enter to deter potential suitors. If she is too tired or not interested, she will simply retreat here for refuge. But it's a precarious kind of safety. If she goes too far, she may end up beached when the tide goes out. And shallow waters don't deter all the competition. Males will pursue a single female for hours for an opportunity to mate. The male will try to get as much of her pectoral fin into his mouth in an attempt to drag her out into deeper water. She twists and turns, struggling to break free. Female nurse sharks are longer and sometimes heavier than the males. She wants to ensure that only the strongest males father her pups, and this one is not strong enough for her. She continues to fight. His efforts are dashed as she twists free and retreats to water too shallow for him to follow. These aggressive mating behaviors scar the fins of the females. Just 1 out of every 10 attempts will end in a successful mating. But another pair has been luckier. With the female's pectoral fin firmly in his mouth, he flips her over. And inserts his clasper. Claspers are calcified organs that anchor the male and channel the sperm to inseminate the female. Everything is over within a few minutes, and the two go their separate ways.
During the course of the mating season, the female might be inseminated by different males. This creates genetic diversity in her pups and gives them a better chance at survival.
The females will return to these same waters in about 6 months' time to give birth. Nurse sharks gestate within the mother and are born live. The pups will then head deeper into the mangroves, where they will feed and grow. After giving birth, the females will not be ready to mate again for 18 months, when researchers hope to see them in these waters again. On the surface, the mangroves appear only as an obstacle to sandy beachfront. But the waters beneath reveal a rich and complicated story. The mangroves are home to some of the most diverse and beautiful life forms on the planet. Many creatures of the Bahamas spend some part of their lives here, finding shelter in the labyrinth of the roots as they grow and hone their skills. The abundance energizes the food web out to the coral reefs and open ocean far past the reach of their branches. The rich blend of wildlife found here depends on the protection and nourishment the mangroves supply, ensuring that year after year, generation after generation, will continue to thrive in the Bahamas.